The first train on our 3-day railfanning adventure across Lakeland would be CSX M453, southbound mixed freight out of Waycross, Georgia, bound for Hialeah, Florida. And with a new crew on board at Lakeland Junction, just a few miles to our west, they'd make their way down south, passing me here at Interlochen Parkway, one of my new favorite spots in the area. Just like M453, the next train would be a pretty usual sight across Lakeland. Amtrak P040, the northbound Floridian with two Siemens ALC-42 Chargers, flying through Interlochen on their way into Lakeland Station, a few miles west of us.
P040 Amtrak P41, south, clear, Lakeland.
After catching P040 here in Interlaken, I'd moved down the Goddard's Produce at the signal called South Lakeland, where I'd see P040 again just a few hours later, with a beautiful sunset behind him. As P040 rolled into his Lakeland stop for the second time today, I'd wait at South Lakeland for another hour or so, as I-144 is coming out of Tampa and would be here soon. I-144 is the Sunday run for I-044, nighttime intermodal from Tampa to Jacksonville, with another ET44 leader. I saw a good amount of these on this trip. I'm not sure why. After I-144, me and Kennedy would end up seeing one more train, but I'll save that for his own video because it was pretty cool. The next morning, though, bright and early, I'd be at Lakeland Junction for a very interesting train with some, let's say, very interesting power, including an S278 with a very nice horn. B208, one of the many Mulberry-bound Phosphate empty trains, would show up on the S-line bright and early on the 3rd, and I had about 2 minutes to spare before he showed up here, and I'm glad I made it on time, because the main reason I came out here was, of course, that very loud S278 in the lead position, which you don't see very often down here. I did record this on my G85 also, and I'll upload that at some point in the future. I'm glad I got him regardless, because I don't see many of these Phosphate empty trains, especially with BNSF power. In the dense fog you don't see too often around here. I waited for about an hour or so, as I knew M452 would show up eventually, with for some reason only one locomotive. You don't see that too often on 452, and it was cool, being another Tier 4 GEVO leader. As per usual, M452 would gradually slow down and stop ahead at 10th Street, where the current crew would get off and a new crew would get on, albeit 5 hours later. I'm not going to bore you with the entirety of M452 since he's pretty usual to how he normally is, so I skipped it when he started slowing down with his long cut of racks here at Lakeland Junction. After stopping at 10th Street, my next train wouldn't be for another 3 or 4 hours when Amtrak P041, the Southbound Floridian, showed up in Lakeland, with AMTK 160 trailing, the Phase 3 Pepsi can unit. It was nice to see this thing on P041, but wish he was leading. I did see it a few days beforehand leading 97, so win some you lose some, but seeing it regardless was pretty cool. After catching P041 here in Lakeland, I'd go back to South Lakeland to wait on something to show up. Then M452 out of nowhere got his new crew and departed from 10th Street, with me not being able to catch him because of midday Lakeland traffic. So I went back to South Lakeland, where another train would show up out of nowhere, actually coming my direction. It'd be L742, a local turn from Winston to Davenport and back. Here, he's going back towards Winston with empty rock hoppers and some other covered hoppers from Auburndale. Haven't seen this train in a while, and of course had another Tier 4 GEVO in the lead. After L772, the waiting would continue when P041 would come back in the picture at Lakeland after making a stop at Tampa Union Station.
91 Amtrak 324 North, I got a clear Lakeland connection, South Lakeland, arriving Lakeland, over.
Got a nice little horn show from Amtrak 41 this time around, which was definitely nice. The next train after P041 wouldn't be that much longer of a wait, and I had a pretty good idea on who it would be at this time of day.
CSX Foreman Chatham, over. Yes, sir, you got the M60403. I've got the engine 798. This is Guthrie. I got to get to the Port Authority northbound, please. CSX Foreman Chatham gives engine number 798 permission to come through his work limits on the Bida sub. from the AR 853.2 to the AR 854.3. Men and equipment are off the track in the clear. You may proceed. Authorized speed for your train. Over. All right, Mr. Bill, Chatham gives the M60403 with the engine 798. Permission to proceed to his work authority on the Vice subdivision. Between the milepost AR 853.2, milepost AR 854.3. Men and equipment are declared authorized speed limit by train. Over. That is correct at 1445. All right, 1445, Chatham Guthrie. Thank you. Okay.
After getting his permission to cross the I-4 overpass on the Vita Sub just north of Lakeland, M604 would leave Winston and proceed north. His final destination? Waycross, Georgia. In the middle of the last stop on M604 would be CSX 6532, a Jeep 40-3 that's been in Lakeland for a while now. I've seen it multiple times on Y jobs, and it's kind of sad to see it go, but now we have a new switcher, which you'll see at one of the next trains, so kind of bittersweet moment for me. After M604, I'd hear an interesting horn across town, and soon it would get closer and closer, and the train would finally reveal itself. Passing me earlier, now with the locomotive facing me, would be CSX Y162, one of the few Winston yard switchers that does some work around the Lakeland area. In the lead of Y162 would be the new switcher used on these jobs, CSX 6461, a Jeep 40-2. Pretty cool seeing a new switcher down here, but it is a little sad not seeing the SpongeBob cab of 6532 on these jobs, since I'm so used to seeing it since they've used that switcher for a good few months. I'd leave Goddard's Produce shortly after Y162, as Amtrak P040 was coming out of Winter Haven, and I wanted to catch him at a new spot. For my shooting spot would be the old ACL bridge over North Gary Road, just west of my usual spot at Interlochen Parkway. If it wasn't for that pole in the way, this would have been a really great shot, and it still was regardless. After catching P040 here, I'd moved to a pretty familiar spot to me and viewers of the channel for some of the evening trains. First up at good old Wabash Avenue would be P040 again, speeding through with a really nice sunset behind him. It seems to happen a lot in this time of day, especially in the standard time. It's like that when it switches to daylight time, you kind of lose this good dark lighting and have the more backlit, sucky lighting that you'll see in future videos. As P040 knocked down the clear signal at South Lakeland, another train would show up here, following right behind him out of Winston Yard. It'd be another one of the Winston Y jobs, CSX Y220, commonly called the boxcar train, carrying, you guessed it, mainly boxcars. This train, unlike the Y162 we just saw, commonly has 6-axle power. Eventually, he get his clear signal and his advanced approach signal at South Lakeland and Lakeland connection, which would eventually go to a clear. Little did I know, while I was focusing on the signal in front of me, Y220 was shoving already behind me. So that resulted in a pretty interesting series of events.
Good, 50 more, 716 over. 50 more, 716.
As Y220 shoved up the hill at Lakeland, making his way towards Park Spur, I'd wait for my last train of the day, which took a lot longer than I was hoping, which resulted in it being pretty dark, but here's IO44, the usual intermodal from Tampa to Jacksonville, with a YN2 leader this time around, and a very interesting K5LA. Not like anyone I've ever heard before, and not necessarily in a good way. CSX 491, we got a medium clear South Lakeland. One to the South Lakeland Y, we're heading northbound. After IO44, I'd head back to my grandparents' house and come back the next day just to see what I could see.
CSX Foreman Chatham gives engine number 5456 permission to come through his work limits on the Vitus sub from the AR 853.2 to the AR 854.3. Men and equipment are off the track in the clear. You may proceed authorized speed for your train, over.
Alright, Mr. Chatham, I understand Wilcox, the lead locomotive CSX 5456, has permission to your work authority on the Vited subdivision. Message number 23984 between mile marker AR 853.2 and AR 854.3. Men and equipment in the clear. I may proceed through southbound direction at authorized speed, over.
That is correct at 1042, over.
1042. I appreciate it, Mr. Chatham. You have a good day. Wilcox out.
CSX Foreman Chatham.
First up would be L743, a southbound rock shuttle from Brown Sam, Georgia on the Fitzgerald sub down the Winston yard. I don't usually catch L743 here in Lakeland, and especially not around 11 a.m., but it was definitely cool to see him regardless, especially with this ES40 in the lead with a very nice K5LA. I'm excited about the distance to Kathleen signal, just south of the control point Kathleen signal, near the Stokes defect detector. Going southbound, the signal is called distant to 10th Street. I'm just north of the I-4 bridge, and L743 is only a few signals away and coming down fast, so eventually, he'd be here. Pretty cool shot to see him at, since this is my first time being here, and just randomly found it on Google Maps. I was wondering why L743 started slowing down, since I figured he would be going a lot faster than this at 10th Street, a few miles south of here. But apparently, sitting at 10th Street on the main line was M452. Not the same one we saw before. This one actually has two locomotives and is pretty much mainly racks. And L743 would be meeting him down there. So after about 20 to 30 minutes, M452 would show up. Sixth shot was a little backlit, but this is a really nice wide open shot. I'll definitely come here a lot more whenever I'm in Lakeland. It'd be another few hours until my next train in Lakeland, and I'd be down at Interlochen Parkway to catch this next one, Amtrak P041, this time with a P42 DC in the lead, numbered 81, with another interesting horn. Not the best compared to other P42s I've heard, and he was definitely going track speed through Interlochen.
9181 clear, this is 6 of the Lakeland main track. Hey, Shay, you don't have a problem with that, do you? Okay, all right, appreciate you, man. I want to try to make a decision about actually how you feel about it. All right, that'll work, man. Appreciate you, that's right.
On its way back into Lakeland from Tampa, I catch P041 again at South Lakeland. No horn this time, though. After P041, I'd have only one more train on my radar for the day, which ended up being the last train I'd see for this 3-day trip. It'd be another M604, this time at Lakeland Junction, in some pretty good afternoon light, with a YN2 AC44 trailing third. I was expecting 1877 to be on this job, since he was down in Winston in that area, but he ended up being on some Bone Valley local, so I wouldn't see him here. But it was a pretty cool way to end off a pretty nice trip around Lakeland. We saw a good amount of trains for me being here for 3 days, and I'll definitely be back for more trips, which you'll see soon on the channel.
M60404, 589, got a Fruit Limited. Lakeland Junction, northbound.
Anyways, enjoy M60404 with 3 Gs in the lead, climbing up through Lakeland Junction.